Here he was in Tata Memorial Hospital, and from that institute he did his MCH, and he was there in Punjab branch of PMH for many years. Then he joined Max Hospital as a consultant, and now he is a senior consultant in the Department of Surgical Oncology in Narayana Dharamsala Hospital. And today he will speak on how to achieve precision in surgical oncology and the role of robotics in achieving precision in surgical oncology. So, Dr. Devasis, you can start.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for sparing your time for this gracing this occasion. And thank you, sir, for the kind introduction. So, what I will be discussing about is precision in oncology. And since I represent the oncology, so I will be talking in a very few lines about radiation oncology, medical oncology, and surgical oncology, how we talk about precision. So, by this slide, I want to show you that a precision strike means a strike that is just delivered to the target area without damaging the surrounding landscape. Similarly, as a clinician to us, it means that achieving only the tumor kill without harming the rest of the body organs. So this is briefly about the organization which I am currently working with, and it's a beautiful organization initiated by Dr. Devi Shetty in year 2000, and one of his famous quotes is that if a solution is not affordable and accessible, it's not a solution anymore. Currently, Narayana has more than 24 hospitals across India. Most of their work is in the south and eastern India. Now they are spreading more and more towards the northern side. So, my MCH was from Tata Memorial in the year 2012 to 15, and after that I was absorbed as a faculty, and I worked for almost 7 years in the Tata Memorial Center of Punjab. It's in Sangrur and in Mohali. It's a 350 bedded hospital. Unfortunately, due to some family events, I had to come back to Delhi, which is my native hometown. My MS was from KGMC Lucknow, and my MBBS was from Kasturba Medical College, Bangalore. So this slide I deliberately wanted to put because mostly whenever we introduce that I am a surgical oncologist, people ask
full screen. Full screen.
Sir, there is some problem with this slide.
That's okay. Okay, the code chalta hai.
Sir?
Okay.
Thank you. So, as a surgical oncologist, we are trained in head and neck oncology, starting from top to bottom, in breast oncology, in thoracic oncology, and coming down into the GI oncology, where we deal with hepatopancreatic, biliary, colorectal cancers, retroperitoneal tumors. We are also trained in uro-oncology, that is the kidney, prostate, uterine bladder, penile cancers and testicular cancer. We also do work in gynecology, that is ovarian cancer, cytoreductive surgeries, IPEC, staging of the endometrium and the cervical cancer. So the concept of tumor board is very unique to our branch. Just like we recently did a wonderful operation Sindoor, and how the strike group coordinate. This is just on the similar platform. How as an oncologist, it's very important that we work in a harmony between the radiation oncologist, medical oncologist, and surgical oncologist to achieve the best desirable outcome for the patient. So this is the composition of our tumor board. We have a surgeon, there is a medical oncologist, there is a radiation oncologist, there is a pathologist, there is a person from the nuclear medicine, because we are very frequently doing the PET scan and we need to interpret as to whatever abnormality a PET scan shows, whether it is related to disease or it can be ignored. Similarly, there is also the role of the radiologist. So this is how the harmony between the three branches of oncology work. And the sequencing is very important. Sequencing means even though if a patient is in an early stage, like for example a triple negative breast cancer, even if it's a stage stage 1 cancer, but the tumor size is more than 2 centimeters, then the guidelines say that we should give a neoadjuvant therapy, either in the form of a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Immunotherapy is desirable, if not immunotherapy because it's very costly, if it's not affordable, at least a neoadjuvant chemotherapy should be planned despite it being an early stage. Earlier, when I was doing my training, the trend was that for resectable early stage cancers, do the surgery first. But now, as the evidence is evolving, we know that the outcomes, even the overall survival is improved when we give neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So this kind of concept is just to exemplify through breast cancer, but mostly across other cancers as well, this philosophy works. So whenever we are making a decision of choice as to what therapy the patient should be offered, the stage of the disease is very important. The type of cancer, histology, like for rectal cancers, it can be either a squamous or it can be adenocarcinoma. For squamous, the preferred therapy is the sphincter preservation with concurrent chemoradiation. However, if it's adenocarcinoma, the preferred approach is a neoadjuvant chemotherapy radiation followed by surgery. Obviously, the performance status as to how the patient will tolerate the therapy is very important, and we have the scoring system like the Karnofsky index or the ECOG score. Age and comorbidities are other factors related to it. So this is just to briefly outline as to when the disease is only limited to a loco-regional site, that is, like for example, if it's limited only to the breast and the axillary lymph node, the main treatment option is usually a loco-regional therapy in the form of radiation and or surgery, plus or minus surgery. However, when the disease is very advanced, it's a metastatic disease or it's a stage 3 or stage 4 cancer, the role of medical oncology in the form of systemic therapies is very important, mostly across all tumor types. This is just to give an example of
पब्लिक को दिखाएगा अभी, सबको दिखाएगा।
अंधेरा करा हुआ है यार तुमने,
सब काले काले आ
तुम्हें
रहे हैं,
कोई लाइट की सेंस है नहीं।
सब काले काले आ रहे हैं। कहाँ चली गई लाइट?
आगे ये वो टाइम लेगा ने प्रोजेक्टर ऑफ
इसको बंद ही कर दो ना तुम। नहीं कोई फायदा नहीं, सब काले काले आ रहे होंगे।
काले काले आ रहे हैं, इधर से लाइट है उस साइड में। उधर वालों की लूँगा सिर्फ, इधर वालों की नहीं लेना।
सर पीछे हट जाओ, प्रोजेक्टर टेढ़ा हो गया।
अच्छा,
So by this slide, what I want to emphasize here is that you can see that there is approximately, say, there is a 5 centimeter tumor on the left side, and because of the unfavorable tumor and breast ratio, if I plan for an upfront surgery, that means the surgery first, this patient would have undergone a mastectomy. However, if I change the sequence, I give chemotherapy first, and if the response is very good, the tumor will shrink and I may achieve a conservation in such a case with a good cosmetic outcome. So this is why the role of tumor board comes into play as to what the patient desires and what can the sequence, altering the sequence of the therapy can help us achieve the desirable outcomes. Similarly, this is a case which I had operated for CA lung. You can see that in the lower slide there is a very big lung mass. We had given this patient a neoadjuvant chemotherapy along with immunotherapy, and in the upper slides the response was excellent, and in fact when we had performed a lobectomy in this case, there was a complete pathological response. So once a complete pathological response is achieved, that means there is no viable tumor in the histopathology specimen. It actually prognosticates that the patient is going to live longer. The outcomes for that patient to get cured are better. So similarly, this is most common scenarios which we see across colon cancers with liver mets. We give a systemic therapy, and you can see an unresectable cancer can be converted into a resectable cancer. Another concept is the role of HIPEC therapy. HIPEC is usually the heated intraperitoneal chemotherapy that is given. However, the case selection is very important, because even if we do HIPEC surgery and the case selection is bad, the outcome, but first it's very costly modality. The cost of a HIPEC surgery with cytoreductive surgery is approximately 11 to 12 lakh. It's a costly modality. It's associated with a lot of morbidity. So choosing the right candidate which will actually benefit from this kind of therapy is very important. So this is the concept I usually discuss. Whenever we try to improve the outcomes, the role of technique, the role of technology and the science is very important. How the technique is changing. Earlier when I was in MBBS during the 1990s, the concept was for any breast cancer, you have to do a mastectomy. It has to be a radical mastectomy going up to the chest wall. But now, as the concepts are changing, as the evidence is evolving, we are able to achieve the similar outcomes by doing a lumpectomy only. Similarly, the concept from axillary clearance is now towards the sentinel lymph node biopsy. That means we inject a dye, we follow that dye, harvest that lymph node that has shown the dye to be picked up, send it for frozen section. If the frozen section says it's a positive disease, positive means the malignancy is shown in the lymph nodes, only then we do a axillary clearance. Otherwise, we can avoid the axillary clearance, because the morbidity of axillary clearance is around 15 to 20% in terms of chronic lymphedema. So my core area where I focus is in breast and thoracic oncology. So another concept that is evolving now is the breast oncoplasty. Earlier, whenever the lumpectomy was done, the lumpectomy cavity was left like that. The skin used to be closed. However, the lumpectomy cavity used to heal by seroma formation. So over a period of time, when the radiation was received to the patient, the seroma cavity used to collapse and the cosmetic outcome used to be very bad. That was known as the Burke beak deformity. But now what we do is we don't leave the cavity open. We try to mobilize the tissue and close that cavity totally, obliterate that cavity totally. So I won't go into the detail, because we are very well aware that the outcomes of a minimally invasive surgery compared to open surgery are dramatic. First is cosmetic, the other is recovery. The patient can join back to the work very soon. And obviously for certain sites, like for head and neck, for the oropharynx, open surgery will be a very mutilating surgery. However, when we do it through a minimally invasive approach like a robotic surgery, the patient can have a very good outcome, functional outcome. Even the speech and swallowing is drastically improved. So this is about the, from here on I will talk about the robotic surgery, how robotic is actually changing. So robotic is also like a minimally invasive surgery, but how it is different is that the view over here is like a 3-dimensional. It is actually like you are seeing, like you are within the abdomen or within the cavity, directly seeing the viscera or the area of concern where you want to operate. However, for a laparoscopy, the vision is like a 2D, although now laparoscopy is also improving. The 3D vision is available in certain laparoscopy camera, but conventionally, the precision, the vision with the robotic is just wonderful. And the second most important thing is the tremors. Some surgeons have tremors, and these tremors are amplified whenever you are using a laparoscopic port. So because of these tremors, certain areas where the precision is very critical, like for thoracic organs where they are operating close to the major vessels, and any injury to the major vessels can be catastrophic. So in these situations, the role of precision by a robotic is just absolutely fantastic. And the other important part is that the robotic arm moves like a arm. It can move in 360 degrees everywhere. However, the standard laparoscopic instrument move either in a to and fro motion or a side to side motion. The robotic arm actually can move like your wrist, which you are which you are operating like an open surgery. So another evolving thing is the role of organ preservation. So by this slide I want to show you that a standard approach, had this patient undergone a lobectomy or a pneumonectomy, could be spared if we do only the limited resection of that bronchial sleeve and we join the rest of the sleeve like a resection anastomosis done for the GI organ. So we can avoid a pneumonectomy by doing a sleeve lobectomy. So these are other endoscopic procedures that can be done either minimally invasive robotic approaches or by laparoscopic approaches. The thyroid surgery, the neck dissection. So this is the robotic system that is available with us. It's the XI system. It is very important to understand there is some myth that is prevailing within the community that robotic surgery is done by a robot. It is actually not. The surgeon totally has a control and surgeon actually operates in the real time. Whatever movement he is doing on the console will be reflected in the patient card within the operating field. So where all the robotic surgeries can be used, it can be used for gynecological cancers, it can be used for urological cancers, thoracic organs and GI organs. I am not very keen to operate upon thyroid surgery because thyroid anyways with a very small scar, it's a very cosmetic scar, it can be done. And most of the thyroid cancers which we usually see are locally advanced and I am not very keen actually for a head and neck robotic surgery. So now just a look as to what the future has for us. The conventional minimally invasive surgery uses multiple ports. There are 2 or 3 ports that are usually inserted, but now the uniportal robot by the Da Vinci has already been launched in the United States and in very soon time we will have in India as well. So what this does is, it is only a single port. It's a large about 1.5 centimeter port through which the other instrument go inside, and within that single incision the arms can be mobilized to operate within the same field. So we need not take 2 or 3 incisions, 2 or 3 ports at different sites. Now we are very often talking about the role of artificial intelligence and will it have any impact to the surgeon? Yes. There was an article shared within our surgical community that was about 2 months back, and it showed that there are trials which are where the robot is being trained by a voice command, and that robot actually did a gallbladder surgery, not for a live patient, but in a dummy, but through voice command that this is the cystic duct, now go left, now go right. The robot could navigate and complete the surgery. So maybe in future the role of surgeons also may be minimized or maybe rudimentary altogether, but till that time we have a bright future. With that I will end and thank you sir.
Thank you, Dr. Devashish. So we will have questions at the end of all the lectures. Dr. Abhishek, you can introduce your speaker.
So I have with me here like 2 bright stars from Dharamshila Narayan Health. Dr. Gaurav is MS, DNP and MCH, and he specializes in robotic joint replacement. And he has an experience of over 7,000 orthopedic surgeries. And so he is the head of unit presently at this hospital. And along with him in his team is another bright young orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Nandan Mishra. And he mostly specializes in arthroscopic surgeries and joint replacements. He has more than 1,000 arthroscopic procedures to his credit so far. and more than 3,000 combined orthopedic procedures. So welcoming both of them to this forum, and I'm sure you will have a pretty nice time attending their presentation, and you will be all geared up for questions and answers. I can see Dr. Tulsi.
तो कह रहा
I think you should be focusing because Dr. Gaurav will start.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the President Forum of India for this platform. So I'm going to more talk about advancement in joint replacement surgeries. So we actually all know how the osteoarthritis looks like and how it behaves. And we all must be familiar how a joint osteoarthritic knee X-ray looks like. So on this side you have a normal knee. In between the femur and the tibia bone, you have this clear space which is covered by the meniscus and the cartilage. So this is a classical osteoarthritic X-ray. How does it look like? And why does it look like that? Is because of the cartilage, which is worn off with time. That's why it's called a wear, tear and arthritic. And it's mostly after the age of 45. So how does an osteoarthritic show up to orthopedic surgeon? So this is a normal alignment X-ray. This is a board leg, which is most common. About 85-90% people will have board leg osteoarthritis, in which you have the inter knee distance or intercondylar distance more than the intermalleolar distance. And then you have something known as knock-knees, which is called genu-valgum deformity. So this is more in an inflammatory or rheumatoid arthritic kind of patient. So as we all know, the final treatment of osteoarthritis is a total joint replacement. And we all must be familiar about how a total knee replacement looks like. So we have a femoral component, you have a tibial component, and in between you have a high high molecular weight polyethylene, which is a plastic. So this totally combines a joint replacement surgery. So what is the aim of a joint replacement surgery? When we talk about a person needs a joint replacement surgery, what is the aim? So aim is basically to restore the mechanical axis. So when I was talking about how does the patient present to your clinic, you have a board leg or a knock knee. So our aim is ultimately to align both the limbs of the patient. So you have to restore what we call as mechanical axis. Then you have a restoring of the joint line and restore the balance of the knee in the flexion and extension. Like a person is walking or sitting, the knee has to be stable post-operatively. So that's the basic aim, that the knee has to be quite balanced and properly working in both sitting and standing position. And that's what we call as flexion and extension gaps. So, and second, last is the restores the quads angle, Q angle. So if you look at this X-ray, you have a line from the hip to the center of the ankle, it is crossing the midline, medial part of the medial tibial joint line. And our aim is to restore the mechanical axis, which is the red line, which is actually going from the center of the knee joint. So what is the ladder? So we have been seeing conventional knee replacement surgery happening since many years now. Then you have patient-specific instrumentation, you have navigation, nowadays robotics is very famous, and then you have AI, augmented reality systems. So how does a knee replacement look like? I'm not sure if you must have been knowing, and this is a quick video how a knee replacement is being done. You've got a midline incision, the patella is inverted, prepared the bone. So basically, a lot of people say the bone is cut, we say the knee is resurfaced. So we only remove the damaged part of the knee joint. So this is how a conventional knee replacement is being done. And it is still being done, and the results is about 97 to 98% success rate with this conventional method. So when I talk about the extension gap, flexion gap, this is the block we use to see how the knee is stable in the flexion and extension. So after preparing both the bones, we do a trial implantation, check the stability of the knee again in extension and in flexion, whether the knee is stable or not. After trial implantation, we do the cementing and the proper final implantation of the knee joint is being done. So this is the cement which fixes to the bone, which fixes the bone in the implant. So this is how a knee replacement is being done. So coming to the next part is patient-specific instrumentation. So this has been performed earlier when the patient had old fractures, bone defects. Till the time robotics and AI was not in the picture. So or navigation. So initially, what we used to the problem with this was time consuming. This was very expensive. The patient had to go undergo a CT scan to basically prepare a 3D model of the knee, which was supposed to be sent to the lab, where the models of the knee was made and specific instrumentation pertaining to that knee were made, sent back to the hospital. It takes a month's time. Autoclave, patient is called back for admission, patient is draped, cut the knee using those blocks, and then the final implantation was done. So those things, nowadays it is very, very rare because we have got navigation robotics nowadays. So these are all cutting blocks which are made based on the CT planning of the patient. So again, like I said, it's based on 3D model. The cutting blocks are generated pre-operatively. They are tailored according to the patient's anatomical requirement and depending on the defects in the bone. Problem is time consuming, expensive, learning curve, increased operating time and intraoperative errors. So since this takes about a month time to prepare and again come back to the OT. So in that 1 month period, there are chances the patient might develop some fracture. Then again this process has to be repeated. So again, intraoperative errors can happen. So this kind of technology is reserved in very, very rare cases. Now you have what is called as navigation assisted TPR. So in this, what we do is, unlike robotics, like if you want to go home, so nowadays what we use is Google Maps. So this is the kind of technology which helps in intraoperative planning. In this, you do not need pre-operative CT scans or anything extra or any radiation exposure to the patient. So when the patient is planned for the surgery, all you need to do is take the patient. There is a system which has got infrared cameras and arrays, and there are trackers on the bone. Like in this, you see the trackers here. So intraoperative, how much varus, valgus, degrees, flexion extension of the component you have to give to the patient to achieve a balanced knee. So it aids in real-time image. Infrared based tracking system is there. The best part is it is image-free system. Like the patient does not need pre-operative CT scans or any MRI or something like that. So again, nothing is fail-safe. Everything has got their own pros and cons. Common errors are again happening during the restoration process. Cutting guides are navigated and errors can occur during bone resection. The problem with this is, again, this is only for the planning and for cutting, but there are no haptic feedbacks. That means the surgeon has to be very crystal sharp while doing bone resections that no soft tissues are damaged during this cutting of the bone. So, and again, because it is giving a two-dimensional, it is not giving a three-dimensional image like robotics. Then coming to the important thing, nowadays they are all hearing about the robotics. Robotics head, robotics knee, robotic partial knee. So what exactly is a robotic? So again, like Dr. Devashid mentioned, it is the surgeon which is important behind the machine. So it is nothing like that we leave the patient on the table after preparing and draping and the robot will perform the surgery. No, it is always the surgeon which is actively participating during the process of the surgery or in real-time assessment of the defects and all those things. So you use of robotic arm to assist the surgeon. The surgeon is always holding the robotic arm while performing the surgeries. Again, this is very important because nowadays there are different companies who has come up with different robot systems. Some are semi-autonomous, some are fully autonomous. So depending on the system, it is important for the surgeon to use the robotic arm or not. So there are, like I mentioned, there are different systems. Different companies have got their own robotic systems. So they are imageless, some are imageless, some are image-free, or they use a CT scan. So you have a semi-autonomous system, you have fully autonomous system. Then you have image system and one is imageless system. When I talk about image system, means the patient has to undergo a CT scan. When image free, only X-ray is sufficient to pursue this. We talk about precision. What is important is that every single degree, how much bone you are cutting also. Millimeter of bone is also important. When we talk about bone cutting and bone resurfacing, those are two different things. In knee replacement, we try to only resurface the bone. We try to only remove the bone which is damaged, not a patient native proper good bone. We do not try to, we avoid to touch it. So this is important. When we talk about precision, the robotic system will tell you how many degrees of alignment. In the starting slide I mentioned, it's all about alignment of the legs. When we talk about the alignment of the legs, it is about how much degree of alignment when you're talking. In one, if I'm moving my hand from here to here, we cannot comment how many degrees of movement I made to my hand. But in robotic system, that system will tell you how many degrees you are moving and how many millimeters. So when we talk about precision, millimeters and degree also matters. एक millimeter body का count होता है when we talk about precision in robotics. So only problem with this is expensive. The system or any system when you talk about it is in CRs. The learning curve is long. It is not suitable for every patient. So when we talk about robotics, patient आते हैं आपके पास बोलते हैं हमारी robotic surgery कर दो. Like if I talk about today, the patient came. They told us कि I want to undergo robotic surgery. I said no, you are not fit. Morbid obese patients, no. Because soft tissue dissection इतना आप उसको separate नहीं कर सकते. Because robotic में we try to preserve the soft tissues. And defect. Right now, as per the literatures, जितने भी robotic system US में कहीं भी बाहर use हो रहे हैं, आए तो बाहर से ही हैं यहाँ पर इंडिया में. So they are all using for primary knees and simple knees, not for complex knees right now. There are no literatures right now who are supporting कि complex knees में करना चाहिए. But as Indians, हम लोग तो सब कुछ करते हैं, so we are still doing it. There are papers and we are still doing it difficult primary also. And the first one was performed in 1988 in UK. So like I mentioned, there are different brands of robots. So this is Velis, this is from Johnson & Johnson, this is Mako, which is from Stryker, and then you have Rosa, which is from Zimmer. Then this is Cubis, which is from Max Merrill, and then you have Cori, which is from Smith & Nephew. So like I mentioned, हर ब्रांड के पास अपने रोबोट सिस्टम है. It's all competitive market. एक लेके आया तो दूसरा भी लेके आया, सब लेके आया. But every system is different. Like every human being is different, every system is different. अगर आप बोलो कि कोई पेशेंट आता है आपके पास, अगर बोलता है कि मेरे को जॉनसन & जॉनसन की घुटने डलवाने हैं, for example, and if I have got a Cubis robot, I cannot use it. That robot is married to that company implant. If a patient saying कि मुझे Johnson & Johnson मुझे Zimmer के घुटने डलवाने हैं, and if I have got a Velis Johnson & Johnson का robot, मैं वो robot use करके Zimmer के घुटने नहीं डाल सकता. So that robot is married to its own parent company. वही parent implant को married है. So when you have a robot of any company, you have to tell the patient, you always tell the patient that I cannot use robot in this because my robot is not parent or it's not married to that implant. So उसमें आपकी एक restriction हो जाती है. So like I mentioned, there are two types. One is fully active or autonomous, and one is semi-active or semi-autonomous. When we talk about Cubis, this is a fully autonomous. This is the only system which is fully autonomous. When we talk about fully autonomous, is ऐसा नहीं कि surgeon बाहर बैठे हैं और robot surgery कर रहे हैं. No, we always have to register the bone. आपको जब हम we always put the pins on the bone, we map the bone, we register the bone कि हमें रोबोट को सिस्टम को बताना पड़ता है ये बोन का ये पार्ट है, मीडियल है, ये लेटरल है, ये पोस्टीरियर है, ये we have to map the bone and then only we execute the surgery. Until and unless the robot does not, the registration is not done, robot will never come to know that where is the patient lying, where is the knee. So the surgeon active participation in any robotic surgery is very important. And that's why I mentioned it is the surgeon behind the machine, not the machine which is important. क्योंकि आप registration कर रहे हो, degrees, alignment, millimeters when we talk about, we all are doing, the surgeon is planning all these things. When the surgeon is planning, robot has no role. Robot has only role when you are doing the cutting of the bone. And then you have semi-autonomous. So, जैसे when we talk about Cori or Mako, ये striker का है, this is Smith and Nephew. These are semi-autonomous system. When we talk about Cubis, this is fully autonomous system. So, what is the principle of robotic surgery? So, when we talk about image-free system and image-based system, when we talk about image-based system is patient को CT scan कराना पड़ता है before the surgery. उसमें आपका 3D मॉडल बोन का तैयार होता है, जैसे नेविगेशन में या हमने पेशेंट स्पेसिफिक इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन में बताया, पेशेंट का 3D मॉडल तैयार होने के बाद ही क्या साइज डलेगा पेशेंट का, कितना बोन कट होगा, वो प्रिपरेशन होती है बिफोर हैंड, बिफोर द सर्जरी. सो जैसा आप अगर इस इमेज में देखो तो आपको कुछ नंबर्स दिख रहे होंगे, जैसे 2.5, 3.5, दीज आर ऑल इन मिलीमीटर्स. जब हम एक लाइन ड्रॉ करते हैं, अगर हमें 2 लाइन ड्रॉ करनी है, हम क्या we cannot make 1 millimeter difference of each line. But in robotic system, every millimeter, whatever you are doing is on the screen. So that's why this planning is important. So pre-op CT or intra-op femur tibia mapping is important. So इसमें क्या होता है, जितने भी आप ये नंबर्स देख रहे हो, जैसे यहाँ देख रहे हो आप 22, ये देख रहे हो, अगर आप मीडियम देख रहे हो 5.5, these are all gaps. These are in millimeters when we talk about. So last point is the augmented reality. जैसे डॉक्टर देवेश ने बोला कि it is the AI which is coming into picture. Same in joint replacement. So when we talk about the AI augmented reality, इसमें भी again ये trackers है. So when we जितने भी रोबोटिक या नेविगेशन या augmented reality surgeries हैं, इसमें बॉडी पे ट्रैकर्स होने हैं. जब ट्रैकर्स होंगे तभी सिस्टम पढ़ पाएगा कि हाँ ये बॉडी में ये घुटना यहाँ पर है, इतना गैप हो रहा है, इतना लूज हो रहा है. So this is all system based on training it comes. So this provides visual aid to the surgeon during surgery. This is the minimal footprint and ambulatory surgery. So this system is very handy. आप एक surgery में use किया, discarded. Unlike robotic which is in crores, this per day will cost you about 20,000 rupees. And it can be used with any implant. This system जो augmented reality is still under study. अभी market में है, Max Merrill लेके आया है. People are we have done couple of cases. So this is very restricted right now. It is still in the early phase of birth. So it is low cost per use. It can be used with any implant, and it consists of single tray. Like when we talk about a tray, these are infrared markers. And इसमें कोई भी image pre-operative CT scan नहीं चाहिए. So when why I am insisting on CT scan? Because one CT scan is equal to hundreds of X-rays. एक patient को normal X-ray में जो exposure होता है, एक CT में हजारों X-ray का exposure होता है. It's in hundreds. One CT image will be around 400-500 X-rays. So that's why image-free systems are coming into the market, and what we are doing is image-free system की तरफ ज़्यादा जाने की हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं.
CTs are available today.
Sorry sir?
Low dose.
हाँ, low dose is available, but every center doesn't have sir. That is the problem. So the conclusion is, it is again attractive and constantly evolving system. Improve our knowledge of knee biomechanics. So when we talk about biomechanics, when I mentioned about the mechanical axis, there are different axes in which we are working. We have kinematics, reverse kinematics, and all those things. And long-term assessment is still needed, and limitation can be improved by artificial intelligence. That's all. Thank you so much.
बंद कर. That's why it.
So after this excellent talk by Dr. Gaurav on knee replacement, Dr. Nandan would be talking about knee arthroscopy.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I won't take much time. We'll go through the. So I'll go through the some of the basic and procedures that we do in arthroscopy. I'll just try to cover that. So now there is advancement in knee arthroscopes. So we have arthroscopes and camera which are advanced, and because of which we have been able to see the knee much better. So there are 4K camera system, there is 8K camera system, because of which we see knee better, and once we see the knee better, of course we do a better job. Now this is the knee arthroscopy, the upper part that you see. So this is the entrapped meniscus which is there. The upper part is the femur condyle, the lower part is the femur, the tibia, and this is the entrapped meniscus. So this is bucket-handed tear. So this I just wanted to show how well we can see just with a small stab incision. So now one of the commonest procedures that we all hear and we perform also is ACL reconstruction. But there are issues with the ACL reconstruction. Even with the best of the best ACL reconstruction, once the graft matures and there is synovial lining around the graft, there have been multiple studies which have shown that synovial layer doesn't have good proprioceptor receptors, and that's why those patients, the patients who undergo ACL reconstruction, probably might have some loss of proprioception in the long term. Otherwise the knee remains stable, there is no problem with the stability, but the proprioception is something which is probably which doesn't recover to the full potential. So that's why what we do, so for the tear, if we consider ACL and divide it into 3 parts, the upper third, the middle third and the lower third. So if the tear is in the proximal part, that means the tear is near the femur, then and rest of the ACL is continuous and he is a young man and the duration of injury is not more than 3 months, then sometimes we do repair them. So if the tear is in the proximal third, the duration is not more than 3 months, and is a young man, we prefer to repair them. So here the first slide, if you see, the tear is in so that tear is near the notch and near the femur condyle. The same is seen in the MRI. So what we do, so we take stitches in the proximal part and repair it, and then we put an internal brace. So these heal. So it has been shown that these repair, if they heal, they are going to do much better than the reconstructed ACL, because we have preserved the native ACL and we have repaired them, and till the time it heals, we can see this thread going. So this is the fiber tape which aids in healing. It gives support till the time this ACL heals, which is called an internal brace. Now we have ACL reconstruction in some of the special cases. So these are my special cases. Hyperlaxity, so females with hyperlax joint, extension of more than 20 degrees in any of the joint, athletes, varus malalignment of the joint, and increased tibial slopes. Increased tibial slope is a very special thing which we will not discuss here, but the upper 3, the hyperlaxity, athletes and varus, these are clinical through the history and clinical examination. So these patients require special mention, because just an ACL reconstruction here may not be sufficient. So here we see that this patient has hyperlaxity with anterior draw grade 3 positive, and you can see the amount of extension in the knee. So it's around 20 degree of extension, grade 3 laxity with pivot shift positive. So here the recommendation is not just an ACL reconstruction. We must do something extra. So that extra thing is extra articular tenodesis. So it's an open procedure. So this is a torn ACL. After we perform this ACL reconstruction, we did this. So this is extra articular tenodesis we do on the lateral side. We take a middle part of the iliotibial band, which is wrapped around the lateral collateral ligament, and then it is fixed on the femur bone again. Now again we talk of ACL or instability in the varus. So now if you see this X-ray, the patient had came to us with instability, but he also had varus malalignment and some medial joint pain. Now this patient alone ACL reconstruction will not work because there is alignment problem. So if varus is less than 10 degrees and the patient also complains of instability, then what we do an ACL reconstruction. So we can see we have done an ACL reconstruction and simultaneously we have tried to correct the alignment, brought it to the neutral, and this is called an high tibial osteotomy. Along with that we have done an ACL reconstruction. Of course this can be staged. We can perform an high tibial osteotomy, correct the alignment, wait for 6 months. If the instability persists, then go for and do an ACL reconstruction. ACL is never a priority, always the alignment takes the center stage. So then few slides about this. So this is a polyester, this is a synthetic graft which is available in the market. We prefer to use in patients who require multiple ligament reconstruction, or in patients where there is chance of some post fixation laxity, especially in hyperlax patient or in athletes. We have used in some of the patients. Now let's talk about the meniscus. So meniscus is a very important structure. It is not just a cushion between the thigh bone and the leg bone. It's a very important structure which maintains the alignment. So if you take out a good part of meniscus and you do a serial X-ray after 3 months and then you repeat it again after 3 months, you will see that the patient is slowly losing his alignment. So meniscus is not just about the shock absorbing, or it's not just a cushion between the thigh bone and the leg bone, but it is very important for maintaining the alignment. So now this is a bucket handle tear of the meniscus. We can see this is the femur, again this is the tibia. This meniscus is entrapped. We have pushed it back, reduced it, and then stitched it with multiple sutures. So this is how we repair it. So this is a bucket handle tear, almost it's like a surgical emergency for us. Again, this is a posterior root tear. Now this is a root. So if the root is torn and rest of the meniscus is perfect, is good, that means that the meniscus is not working. So even though the meniscus is structurally there and the root is torn and the meniscus is extruded out, but this meniscus is not working. If we leave this patient like this, the patient is very soon going to land up into medial joint arthritis and probably will require a high tibial osteotomy or a unicondylar. So here we have repaired the root. So we have taken stitches through the root and then pulled it to the tibia and then fixed it. But here when we see this is again a case of root tear, but here we see some fibrillation on the femur side. So there is an alignment problem and there is a root tear. So here just a repair will not work. We must correct the alignment again. Here we have corrected the alignment with a high tibial osteotomy and then fixed. Then we have repaired meniscus. Now this is a multi-ligament reconstruction. Now this patient had ACL tear, MCL tear, medial meniscus tear, ACL, MCL, PCL and a medial meniscus tear. All 3 ligaments and the meniscus were reconstructed in the same sitting. It was done because nowadays we know the isometric points. Isometric points is the exact anatomical location where the ligaments are attached. Once we know that, performing surgery becomes much simpler. So nowadays we know the exact isometric point for all the ligaments, and the meniscus was repaired. The patient is now more than 1.5 years and he is performing all his activities. So my take-home messages are: there is advancement in understanding of knee anatomy, and there is advancement in visualization of the knee with latest camera. There's minimal invasion and restoration of anatomy. We must restore the alignment before going for any of the soft tissue procedures, be it meniscus or the ligament, and we must try to preserve the native joint as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Friends, I think our speakers have done a wonderful job to
finish the talk exactly around 10 to 10:03. So we have about 20 minutes for interaction, and I would like to wind up the discussions, the question answer session by exactly by 10:20, 10:25 maximum, so that our elder people like Dr. Jaspreet Singh sir, Dr. T.N. Rao sir can have their dinner. Although the dinner is open even now for them, if they want, they can have their dinner. There is absolutely no problem. I would instruct the hotel staff to give them dinner. Just indicate to us, but please do not leave without taking dinner. That is my request. You've been here for 3 years. It is not fair on us that you leave without taking dinner. Especially Dr. Mathur, who comes all the way from Gurgaon. So, sir, please do not leave without dinner. And same is my request to Dr. Meena Walia sir and to Dr. Abdul Kishan sir. If you can wait for 20 minutes, wonderful. If you cannot, please indicate to us. We'll arrange for dinner for you. So we had 2 wonderful sessions, one on oncosurgery and 2 wonderful sessions on orthopedics. So I'm sure you will be having some questions. And first to my moderators to set the context for the first talk, Dr. S.K. Poddar sir.
So thank you, Dr. Devashish. I think for overview of surgical oncology and role of robotic surgery. Sir, I will ask only one question because I think there are many learned persons here. Dr. So you said about that now earlier we were doing mastectomy in most of the breast cancer patients. Now we can preserve breast in most of the patients. So there is some role of neoadjuvant chemotherapy also in reducing the incidence of mastectomy. So neoadjuvant chemotherapy, what is the criteria you decide? Is it dependent on the size of the tumor or any other factor? When will you give neoadjuvant chemotherapy in breast cancer?
I will make it very simple. Whenever the disease is locally advanced, that means the tumor size is more than 5 cm or it is a node positive, it is always the criteria that we should give neoadjuvant chemotherapy, irrespective of the ER. So one more thing I want to highlight here. Whenever we do the breast biopsy, we ask for 4 things. One is ER/PR status, that is ER, PR, HER2 status, and Ki67. So on these basis, the breast cancer is an umbrella term. So on that basis, it is divided into 4 classical types. One is the triple negative, where all the receptors are negative, ER/PR negative, HER2 negative. The other is all triple positive, ER/PR positive, that is luminal A, luminal B type, and HER2 enriched. HER2 enriched can be either ER/PR negative or ER/PR positive with HER2 positive. So just to make it simple, whenever the disease is locally advanced, that means it's a node positive or the tumor size is more than 5 centimeters, always the criteria we give a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Now coming on to the questions that which you asked, in early breast cancer, where it is a resectable, it's a node negative, where to offer neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So one is the receptor type. If it's a triple negative, even if it is less than 2 centimeter node negative, we will give neoadjuvant chemotherapy along with immunotherapy, that is Keytruda. So that is the current guidelines that are being followed. The other is ER/PR negative and HER2 positive. So these 2 criteria, even if for an early stage node negative, we always prefer to give a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. The other criteria is when we see that suppose if the breast volume is around 50 cc and out of that the tumor is occupying almost 20 cc or 25 cc, the tumor ratio is larger as compared to the breast. So if I plan to do a surgery for her along with the margin, the residual breast will be a very small volume. So what I can do is, what I can attempt is give a chemotherapy first. The tumor might shrink and the rate of shrinkage depends on the receptor type. For a triple negative, the response rate is somewhere around 75%. And in fact, 30% of the patients can have a complete response. That means the tumor can disappear after chemotherapy. However, the response decreases when there is ER/PR positivity and HER2 negative. HER2 positive tumors have somewhere in between 50 to 60% response rate. So basically, one is the desire about the patient to achieve a breast conservation. The other is about the ERPR status and the HER2 status.
So the other question is related to the worst variety according to receptor is triple negative. And best is ERPR positive and HER2 negative. That is the best variety. Now it's my favorite thing. I always say whenever cancer discuss, whenever there is a patient, I have told in this forum also, bleeding PR patients, we should never try to treat their piles unless there is proctoscopy done by anyone, even a physician can do, and you rule out cancer factor. You must do that before you start treating the pile. That I always say. So my questions are finished. It's open to forum now.
Sir, in your setup, if I send you a case of mass in the breast with some axillary nodes, and you examine the patient, you say it looks like suspicious, what would be the cost from your initial investigations to PET scan, I'm sure which must be in-house with you people, to surgery and to post-op care? What would be the cost for a year, which I can tell my patient, because a lot of people ask me, sir, kharcha bataiye kitna lagega? So, and is it on CGHS, ECHS kind of? You word.
So I will answer your last part first. Our hospital has all the empanelments. It has CGHS, it has ECHS.
But you operate only in Dharamshila,
I
Narayan?
operate on both centers.
In Gurgaon also? The orthopedic team also?
Orthopedics, we are only in
Or actually clarified. So you are operating at all the centers and they are all almost all the panels.
yeah.
Alright, so what is the cost of working on this patient along with surgery? And suppose the PET scan is negative, there is nothing on the PET scan, then probably you won't go for chemo, you will still go for chemo. Your answer.
You had mentioned that there are some nodes as well.
In the axilla.
So are the nodes emit on PET scan? That will be my question to you.
Alright.
So if the nodes are positive, definitely it falls into the criteria that the patient is now locally advanced. For a locally advanced, we will give chemotherapy first. And again, the cost of chemotherapy will depend whether it's a triple negative. In triple negative, we use immunotherapy, and the cost of immunotherapy is around 26 lakh for total package.
For one therapy, 4 lakh.
For all, sir, total package, that will be around 2 years. So 26 lakhs. However, if the scenario is
Is that
little
covered
better,
in the CGHS?
if they need to take a special approval, we have been doing and we have sent the patient. But yes, they allow, because it's now in the guidelines. That is for patients which are cash paying. But now CGHS, when we write letter, we have seen that they approve.
I need your attention, please. I need your attention for next 20 minutes only.
So again, the other type where the HER2 status is positive, again, this patient will need the HER2 based therapy, that is the targeted therapy. It is known as, it is called the trastuzumab.
You
Along
will only do chemo in this patient, you won't operate?
we will operate. But neoadjuvant first, considering that it is
After that, followed by surgery.
So again, if it's a very simple chemo for ERPR positive, where we give only taxanes and adrenomycin, the total package will be around 4 to 5 lakhs for chemotherapy. Coming on to surgery, the surgery cost will be somewhere around, again it will depend whether the patient wants in a general category or a private, it will vary from 1.5 to 2.25 lakh.
So I can tell the patient everything is going to be fine within 10 lakhs.
Depends, sir, depends. It's a very unrealistic.
Rule out immunotherapy. I am not giving immunotherapy. Otherwise, everything.
Radiation. We are missing on radiation as well.
Another 2.5 to 3 lakhs. So I said 10 lakhs. So a million rupees. Is that okay? Right. So I'm sure that there will be some questions. Lalit, you have a question, Ravi? Good.
Just out of curiosity, I want to know which is more common, right side cancers of the breast or left side? Left side.
Left side are more common what we have seen.
By how much percent?
So it's about 45% to 55%. Not much, but worldwide literature says that it's seen. But in our experience, what our data is like, there is no specific.
Dr. Hari, he himself is a surgical oncologist. Just a minute. Dr. Naveen, he is a surgical oncologist. He knows you, and I am from Yuva. He is at Neti Park. He has a question.
So that's a very good question. Whenever we give chemotherapy, one more point I want to add is that we always place a marker. We always place a marker because we know that if there is a complete response, I don't know where to target. Especially when the patient wants a conservation, I don't know where to go. So what we do is we place a marker and we ask our radiologist, once the chemotherapy is completed, we will put a wire over there and we will follow that wire during the time of surgery, reach the center of the wire, take out that tissue and send for a specimen mammogram to see that the clip has been sampled, the marker has been sampled, and the next step will be sending it to the frozen section. People commonly ask that yes, now the breast lump has disappeared, then why is there need of surgery? The need of surgery is to confirm whether there has been a complete pathological response or not. We can't say by any imaging modality, a microscopic disease at a cellular level can't be picked up by a PET scan, even an MRI. So we need to confirm that we have achieved a complete pathological response, and that can only be achieved by removing that the part of the area that has been clipped.
Dr. Ranjit Chakravarti.
Are using your own medicines or they can get medicines from Walmart and MSD?
It has to be from the hospital, especially from the IPD patients. OPD patients, they can get from the pharmacy which are intended.
Because that the initial cost of the chemotherapy is in lakhs. So many patients, like one of my patients went to Max, they said they use their own medicine. He said, I'm a surgery patient, I can't afford it. We ultimately went to AIMS where they were accepting the medicines provided by CGHS and we took the chemo,
AIMS but most of the private centers, until unless the time interval where they procure the medicine is a bit longer, in those special scenarios they allow outside medications to be around. And otherwise, if the hospital pharmacy has that medication, it has to be purchased from the hospital pharmacy.
Dr. Tulsi and Dr. Kangar sir. Dr. Tulsi sir.
Thank you, Dr. John. So, nice talk, Dr. Tulsi. So, talking about the aortic lung cancers, the lobectomy, segmentectomy, or wedge resection, the standard of care, especially in lung cancer 1A, seems to be segmentectomy. Tell us, sir.
Segmentectomy.
Lobectomy, segmentectomy, or wedge resection, the standard of care in stage 1A, lung cancers.
Now we are more evolving. The evidence says that even a segmentectomy gives as much as the same outcome as compared to a lobectomy. However, if the tumor is more than 3 centimeters, in those situations the lobectomy will be preferred. The other thing is the patient has a comorbidity, especially for the elderly patient or a patient who has a very compromised lung function. In that patients, definitely either it can be a non-surgical approach, that means I will give a SBRT, a focused radiation in that part, that will be a total non-surgical treatment. Or if the patient opts and I feel that the lung functions are up to the mark that he can tolerate at least a segmentectomy or a wedge resection, I will prefer a sublobar resections, that means either a segmentectomy or a wedge resection in those cases, and the wedge has to at least a margin of at least 1.5 to 2 centimeters.
Okay, it will depend on the size of the tumor,
size and location,
and comorbidity, lung functions. Right, thank you.
Very nice talk, sir, and very interactive session. Just one comment. When PET scan was not here, we were not knowing about PET scan. Radical mastectomy, then we came to modified radical mastectomy, then fully lumpectomy, and then reconstruction at the same time. So what next we are aiming at? What is the future?
Sir, there are now studies that for patients which have been given neoadjuvant chemotherapy, can a surgery totally will be avoided? Like there was a question previously. So what they are doing is they are doing multiple biopsies. They are putting multiple clips and taking the biopsies. If the biopsies are negative, there are certain studies which are going on, and what they are comparing is, yes, in one arm there is a surgical approach where we remove the part of the clipped area. The other is total non-surgical approach. So that is the future. Maybe we can have an answer after certain more robust, more clinical trials are available in this format, where the descaling, that de-escalation of the treatment. That means the surgery altogether may be avoided. That is number one. The other is, there is also evidence that is coming that a radiation can also be omitted in certain tumor types, especially after breast conservation. So that is another approach. That is called the de-escalation therapy. Number one, that is surgery can be avoided. Number two is radiation can be avoided.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Debashish. I mean, you can take your chair. We'll move to the second part of the CME on orthopedics, and I would request Dr. Abhishek Mishra to set the context for the question and answer session.
Actually, surgical oncology has already eaten up most of our time, and orthopedics is losing interest because after the government did the price capping, surgical oncology has become hotter than orthopedics and joint replacements. But still, I have a question for Dr. Gaurav. What type of alignment would you do you prefer in knee replacements, like mechanical alignment or kinematic alignment or functional alignment, anatomical alignment or restricting kinematic?
I'm still sticking with mechanical alignment.
The conventional and
That's correct. Animatic and all those things are still coming out. And for animatic, you cannot do it conventional. You need robotics or navigation or animatics or...
what is the percentage of replacements you are doing, like robotics as compared to the conventional TCAS?
So robotic only part is that all the insurances are not covered. They are not covered. Patient has to pay.
How much are you charging in your patient for robotic?
38,000 for robotics.
That's the average, 30 to 40.
We are actually only charging for the consumables, like that. Otherwise, nothing extra, no surgeon, no hospital, nothing. It's just a consumable. Sorry, sir?
Which one is here? So any questions from the audience?
Dr. Gaurav, wonderful talk. I know you are a wonderful surgeon from legs, but your talk was very good. When you do the TKR in patients, do you prefer one knee first or you do bilateral?
Depending on patient, what I have been for the past 10 years, 70 above middle stage, one single knee. Irrespective if the patient has any medical problem or not problem. Better is to do stage. If the patient is less than 70 and both knees, better will again. If less than 70, patient has got any problem, comorbidities, then we will again. We can't hear you. The fitness of the patient. So what we do is 70 or above, patient has any comorbidities or no comorbidities. I prefer stage. एक नहीं किया 6 हफ्ते बाद दूसरा करो. अगर 70 से कम है पेशेंट, बहुत नहीं कर सकते. अगर PSC में एनेस्थीसिया वाले ने बोला नहीं एक करके करो, बस एक वो चीज हो जाए.
Okay, many times when you see a patient of osteoarthritis, you see that it is actually unicompartmental osteoarthritis, and you don't have
I
to
have seen lot of patients nowadays. आज ही मैंने एक पेशेंट को किया है बायलैटरल उसका यूनिक कंपार्टमेंट नी रिप्लेसमेंट करने. आज मैंने दो पेशेंट इन फैक्ट
that cheaper than doing the whole
मोर एक्सपेंसिव.
that is more expensive.
तो जो चीज कम डिमांड में है उसकी प्राइस ऑटोमेटिकली ज्यादा होगी. जो चीज बल्क में बन रही है उसका प्राइस कम होगा. So today only I have two patients for next week with bilateral uni compartmental knee replacement.
Right. Dr. Nandan Mishra, I want to ask you a question. We get a lot of patients with shoulder injuries, you know, and we have a lot of diabetics with periarthritis, and we are always tempted to believe that it is only periarthritis. For me as a clinician, when would you like me to refer that case to you? You know, I have given him physiotherapy for maybe 20 days. I have given him a lot of COX-2 inhibitors, which I cannot keep on giving, endlessly because he is diabetic and I have fear of kidney issues. So at what stage would you like me to refer this case to you for an arthroscope?
We are talking of periarthritis. So periarthritis, what I understand, so the patient has pain and restricted movement. Now, first, periarthritis is a diagnosis of exclusion. We must rule out all other pathologies, be it of tear, any infection, be it biceps tendinitis, anything. So we must rule out all those pathologies before calling it a periarthritis. Because periarthritis is a typical diagnosis of exclusion. The rest, everything is normal and there is capsular hypertrophy, and because the patient has restricted. Now when the patient comes, of course the initial treatment will be some preservative treatment, painkiller, therapy. But once the patient is not responding, duration I cannot tell you, but maybe second 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the patient needs not improving, and we are almost sure that it is periarthritis after doing an imaging also. Then the treatment of periarthritis does not just physiotherapy. We must give intra-articular steroid injection. So that remains the gold standard treatment for a classical adhesive capsulitis or periarthritis or whatever. So we must give intra-articular steroid because that is actually the treatment. Most of the patients will respond. In fact, the regulation says more than 90% of the patients will respond to a single shot of correct intra-articular and subacromial steroid injection. Followed by, of course, rehab, all your exercises. But once these patients don't respond to single injection, a second injection can be repeated by 3 months. If they don't respond after 3 months also, then we have an option. So we call it a resistant periarthritis. Now the patient is not responding to any of the treatment. Then we go to the arthroscope. Here what we do, we do a 360 degree capsular release. 360 degree. So what we have seen, the thickness of capsule in the shoulders, what is referred is 2 mm. But once we release that, we see that the thickness is like almost 6 to 8 millimeters. That is the thickness of capsule that happens in the periarthritis. So that needs to be released, and it has to be released in 360 degrees. So the anterior, posterior, and the posterior. Once they release that, then manipulation of the shoulder, manipulation and then post-operative they will go for a therapy. And these patients will require again an intra-articular steroid injection after 6 weeks of this procedure. Because even if they achieve movement, the pain will still remain. And they will require gold standard treatment even after a periarthritis capsule release will remain intra-articular steroid. That is the thing which we take care of.
So as I understand, you give 2 injections of intra-articular steroid at 3 months interval, and if the patient is still not responding, you go for arthroscopy. I understand you give injectable triamcinolone?
Yes.
Right. So now this patient which I referred to you, actually I reviewed him myself, and I felt that they started complaining of pain little lower down, and I am suspecting my diagnosis whether it is actually diabetes with periarthritis or something else. I get an MRI done, and this patient has got a rupture of latissimus dorsi, which is actually causing the shoulder pain, and the pain is now going down. How do I refer this case to you, and what will you do about it?
Mike, sir.
Mike.
Keep it here.
If the patient has isolated latissimus dorsal, rupture,
Go there, sir.
sir,
Sir, if the patient has isolated latissimus rupture, the patient's prognosis is very poor. The patient is not a candidate. If it is a non-traumatic latissimus rupture, the patient has a very poor prognosis. We have to, so any kind of repair is not going to be helpful for this patient. Diabetic patient with a long muscle rupture which is atraumatic, patient will have some compromise of the treatment. We need to focus on his pain management, whatever modality.
What do you do? What do you do? Keep on giving him analgesics?
No analgesic. Refer it to a therapist, refer it to a pain specialist. Whatever modality we cannot be giving painkiller, but we have to tell him the isolated large muscle tear which is not traumatic in a diabetic will have a poor functional outcome. We need to take care of his pain, whatever pain modality.
Wonderful answering. Dr. Gaurav, I wanted to ask you, should we refer only knee to you or we can also refer hip to you? Are you also with hip?
Yes, we are doing some experiments.
Alright. What is the cost of a total hip replacement bilateral in your setup? Cash patient. Bilateral hip replacement in your setup, cash patient. 5.5, maximum 6 lakhs in their setup. You have a question, sir? Sir, Dr. Mathur sir, आप आगे आए थे तो क्वेश्चन है, सवाल है? हाँ, एक सवाल पूछिए ना सर. बात तो एक सवाल है.
I have got my bilateral report 8 years back, and I am now 77. I am doing all my exercises. What I expect to do prevent falls, prevent falls, helping falls,
prevent falls, keep your calcium vitamin D your bone strength is important.
But now I was compared with a conventional knee replacement, this is now robotic knee replacement. What are the outcomes?
Sir, robotics and all are still in the stage. The papers, the literature supporting it, how even but definitely there is an edge for complex cases. And you need more precision, and you need more deformities,
then conventional therapy will be less expensive than the robotic.
Yes, sir.
So we will prefer to conventional if we find reasonable for it.
Sir, we need to understand convention nowadays. Sir, everybody is they are much more faster to robotics is always 10-20 minutes extra.
So the expert handler Abhishek.
So far, no long-term studies available which can actually define the difference between conventional and robotics. So we need to wait for 20-30 years to be legal.
So the conventional, the success rate is 97-98%.
Conventional therapy is the same like Abhishek, which is always
Good question from Dr. Mathur sir, Patron Physician Forum of India. And last 5 minutes, Dr. J.P. Tulsi and Dr. Kagar.
So, Dr. Mathur talked about conventional versus robotic versus MIS. Dr. Bhandari, so conventionals reserved for certain indications like a BMI more than 40, severe valgus deformity, severe osteoporosis, and prior arthrotomy. Probably these are the indications we like to do a conventional instead of a robotic or a MIS.
No, sir.
Go ahead.
BMI definitely. The literature for robotics, the companies do not advise you to do robotics in very heavy weight.
That's what I said.
Why? Sir, the literatures, the technology do not support it right now. And
conventional better
and robotics is definitely more time consuming. In best test of hands also, robotics will take another 20 minutes extra as compared to conventional. When you have a patient who is so heavy, the tissues, the retraction of the tissues and robotics will be always different. That's why they do not advise in AM and in the 40.
But in abdominal surgery, robotics is better in
That's okay. Yes, sir. Abdominal space is big. In knee, we are cutting only for about 10-12 centimeters.
What?
आइए 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 बोलिए सर.
Now, my second question would be regarding the smart implants. Which track your activity and
Still up, it is still coming.
coming in India, it's available abroad.
Now, what we joint replacement we are doing is cemented. We are using a cement, no, hear me out. Like, we are using a cement between the implant and the bone to fix it. Now, cementless knee replacements are coming. And another one, ceramic is also coming. But these are all in the initial stages.
Okay, so which is the best metal to be used? Is it the oxonium metal or is it the cobalt chromium?
Cobalt, chromium, oxonium, all are good. Oxonium has got an edge by antioxidants.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
No more questions. You took us to a higher level of education, sir. My only comment is, whenever I listen for something robotic, I am reminded of a writer, Christian Chandra, who had written some 70 years back about robots. The first novel was Sitaro Se Aage. Thank you so much.
I just want to ask something. What is the incidence of revision DKR in your center?
Revision DKR. Revision DKR.
It's becoming very common nowadays.
Revision DKR, you have to understand. Mostly is how it has been done. If the patient is lasting more than 30 years, bones are weak, or there is a fracture, infection, late onset of infection, then also you can add it in. The incidence is about 5%, 5%.
Incidence of infection nowadays, a lot of patients are unable to
Depends. I'm not here to comment about it, but all the surgeons will take their best of precautions. But nobody can guarantee that infection नहीं होगा. 1% तो हो सकता है.
As the number of reading would increase, the number of revisions would increase. That is normal.
I would request Dr. Podar sir to summarize the first hearing for us and the carry home message for us.
So, Dr. Devasis, you did a wonderful job in